All right, so today we're diving into something that can be a real game changer for anyone working with infrastructure as code at scale.
Yeah.
Terragrunt.
Oh, okay.
You've probably heard of Terraform, and it's powerful.
For sure.
But as your projects grow,
Yeah.
you might start feeling like you're wrestling with configurations, environments, dependencies.
It's a lot to keep track of.
It's a lot to keep track of.
Definitely.
And that's where
Terragrunt
comes in, right? It's like this secret weapon that helps you wrangle all those Terraform files and keep things organized.
Yeah.
I'm curious, though, if someone's already comfortable with Terraform, why would they even need Terragrunt? What's the real value add here?
So Terragrunt doesn't replace Terraform.
Okay.
Think of it more as an enhancement.
Okay.
It sits on top of Terraform and provides a layer of abstraction that helps you manage your code more effectively, especially as your projects scale. Imagine you're working with a team of developers, all contributing to the same infrastructure.
Right.
Without a tool like Terragrunt, keeping everyone on the same page, managing dependencies, and ensuring consistency can quickly become a nightmare.
So it's not just about making things look prettier.
Yeah.
It's about solving real-world problems that arise when you're dealing with complex infrastructure and large teams.
Exactly.
Right.
Terragrunt addresses these challenges by providing features like code reusability, remote state management, and dependency management, all within a framework designed to reduce boilerplate and streamline your workflow.
Okay, you've piqued my interest.
Okay.
But let's back up a bit.
Okay.
For someone who's maybe heard the name Terragrunt but doesn't fully grasp what it is,
Right.
how would you explain it in simple terms?
Terragrunt essentially allows you to define your infrastructure once and then reuse that definition across different environments like development, staging, and production without repeating yourself. It does this through a combination of configuration files and a command line interface that extends Terraform's capabilities.
So instead of copy-pasting the same configurations over and over again for each environment, you define it once in Terragrunt,
Right.
and it takes care of applying it everywhere.
Exactly.
That sounds like a massive time saver and a huge reduction in potential errors.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's just one of the benefits.
Right.
Terragrunt also simplifies remote state management, which is crucial for collaboration and avoiding conflicts when multiple people are working on the same infrastructure.
Right.
It also handles dependencies between modules, ensuring things happen in the right order during deployments.
You mentioned dependencies.
Yeah.
Can you give a real-world example of how Terragrunt manages those?
Sure. Let's say you have a web application module that depends on a database module being set up first.
Right.
With Terragrunt, you can define that dependency in your configuration files, and it will automatically ensure the database is deployed before the web application tries to connect to it.
So no more manually trying to figure out the order in which things need to be deployed.
Right.
Terragrunt takes care of orchestrating all of that behind the scenes.
Exactly.
Okay,
It takes away a lot of the mental overhead and potential for human error, allowing you to focus on the bigger picture.
All right, I'm starting to see the appeal here.
Okay.
We've touched on some of the benefits, but let's break down the key features that make Terragrunt so powerful.
Okay.
One that you mentioned earlier was code reusability,
Yeah.
the DRY principle.
Right.
Can you elaborate on how Terragrunt embodies that?
So Terragrunt lets you define reusable configurations that can be shared across multiple modules and environments. For instance, you can set up standard configurations for things like remote state storage, provider settings, or common module inputs.
Okay.
Instead of repeating these configurations in every module, you define them once in a central location, and Terragrunt automatically applies them wherever needed.
So it's like creating building blocks for your infrastructure that you can easily assemble and reuse across different projects.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
It not only saves time and effort, but also enforces consistency and reduces the likelihood of errors.
And we mentioned remote state management.
Yeah.
How does Terragrunt handle that differently or better than just using Terraform on its own?
So with Terraform, managing remote state can be a bit cumbersome, especially as your infrastructure grows.
Right.
You often have to manually configure backends, deal with locking issues, and make sure everyone on your team is pointing to the correct state file.
Okay.
Terragrunt simplifies this process significantly by providing a standardized way to configure and manage remote state.
So less manual configuration and less room for error.
Precisely. It takes care of the nitty-gritty details, so you can focus on defining your infrastructure, not wrestling with state files.
Okay, this is all starting to sound pretty compelling.
Yeah.
But before we move on, I want to get a bit more specific.
Okay.
We keep mentioning these terragrunt.hcl files.
Right.
What are they exactly, and how do they fit into the whole Terragrunt ecosystem?
So the terragrunt.hcl file is basically the heart of Terragrunt.
Okay.
It's a configuration file written in HashiCorp configuration language, HCL, where you define things like the location of your Terraform modules, remote state settings, dependencies between modules, and any input variables you want to pass to your Terraform code.
So it acts as a bridge between Terragrunt and Terraform.
Exactly. Yeah. It tells Terragrunt how to execute your Terraform code, where to store the state, and how to handle any dependencies.
And are these terragrunt.hcl files difficult to write?
Not at all.
Okay.
The syntax is pretty straightforward, and Terragrunt's documentation provides plenty of examples and guidance. It's designed to be accessible even if you're not a seasoned developer.
So you don't have to be a coding wizard to use Terragrunt?
Nope.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
So it sounds like Terragrunt is all about simplifying things.
Yeah.
But could it also be a sign of a bigger trend in infrastructure management? Are we moving towards a world where these complex tasks become increasingly abstracted away from the user?
I think so. Yeah, I think you're onto something there.
Really?
The success of tools like Terragrunt highlights a growing need for higher-level abstractions in infrastructure management.
So as systems become more complex and distributed, we need tools that allow us to focus on the what rather than the how. Tools that handle the underlying complexity while empowering us to define our infrastructure in a clear and concise way. So it's not just about making things easier for the user. It's about fundamentally changing the way we approach infrastructure, design, and deployment. Instead of getting bogged down in the low-level details, we can operate at a higher level of abstraction, thinking about the overall architecture and desired outcomes.
Exactly. And this shift towards higher-level abstractions is happening across the tech landscape.
Like, where else are you seeing this?
Well, look at the evolution of programming languages, for example. We've gone from low-level assembly languages to high-level languages like Python and JavaScript. Which allow us to express complex logic in a more human-readable and manageable way. The same principle applies to infrastructure management. We're moving away from manual configuration and scripting towards declarative tools that allow us to define our desired state, and the underlying system figures out how to make it happen.
So that's a really interesting parallel.
Yeah.
So in a way, Terragrunt is like the Python or JavaScript of infrastructure management. It's bringing that higher level thinking and automation to a domain.
I think that's a fair comparison.
Okay.
And as this trend continues, we can expect even more powerful and intuitive tools to emerge, tools that further abstract away the complexity and empower developers to build and manage infrastructure at an even higher level.
That's exciting to think about.
It is.
But for now, let's zoom back in on Terragrunt.
Okay.
We've covered the core features. But are there any other aspects or use cases that really highlight its versatility and power?
One area where Terragrunt really shines is its ability to work with modules from different sources. So with traditional Terraform, you're usually limited to using modules in the public Terraform registry. But Terragrunt lets you pull in modules from various locations, including private Git repositories, local file systems, or even HTTP URLs.
So you're not locked into a single source for your module. You have the flexibility to use modules that are specific to your organization or team. Or even leverage modules from open source projects hosted on platforms like GitHub.
Exactly. This opens up a world of possibilities for customization and control, allowing you to build and share infrastructure components that are tailored to your specific needs.
That's a huge advantage when it comes to building reusable infrastructure.
For sure.
And avoiding vendor lock-in.
Yeah.
And speaking of customization, how does Terragrunt handle testing?
So Terragrunt leverages Terraform's existing testing capabilities.
Okay.
So you can still use tools like Terraform Validate and Terraform Plan to check your configurations before applying them.
Okay.
But it goes a step further with its Terragrunt Unitest feature.
Okay.
Which allows you to write unit tests specifically for your Terragrunt configurations.
So you can test the logic and behavior of your Terragrunt code in isolation, independent of the underlying Terraform execution. That sounds incredibly valuable for catching errors early in the development process.
It is. Think of it like writing unit tests for your application code.
Right.
You're verifying that each component of your Terragrunt configuration is working correctly before you deploy it to your infrastructure.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
It's all about shifting left on testing and preventing issues before they reach production.
Yeah.
And we've talked a lot about the technical aspects of Terragrunt.
Yeah.
But there's another element I'm curious about, the community.
Sure.
What's the Terragrunt community like?
The Terragrunt community is one of its greatest strengths.
Oh.
It's a very active and supportive community with developers from all over the world sharing knowledge, best practices, and even contributing to the development of the tool itself.
Wow.
You'll find a wealth of resources online, including documentation, blog posts, tutorials, forum discussions. And the maintainers of Terragrunt are very responsive and actively engage with the community.
So it's not just about the code.
Right.
It's about the people behind the code.
Yeah.
And the shared learning and support that comes with being part of that community.
Exactly.
That's really valuable, especially for someone who's new to Terragrunt.
Right.
And might need some guidance along the way.
Absolutely. And that community support is a key factor in the success of open source projects like Terragrunt.
Right.
It's a testament to the power of collaboration and shared knowledge.
So I'm starting to think Terragrunt is more than just a tool.
Yeah.
It's a philosophy, a way of thinking about infrastructure management that emphasizes clarity, reusability, and community.
That's a great way to put it. And this philosophy is becoming increasingly relevant as the complexity of infrastructure continues to grow.
Well said. Oh. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, there's one crucial aspect we haven't touched on yet.
All right.
Security. Yeah. How does Terragrunt address the security considerations that are so essential when managing infrastructure?
It's important to remember that Terragrunt itself doesn't introduce any new security vulnerabilities.
Okay.
It's a wrapper around Terraform.
Right.
So the security best practices you follow with Terraform apply equally to Terragrunt.
Okay.
But Terragrunt can actually enhance security in some ways.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
How so?
Well, remember how Terragrunt enforces remote state management?
Right.
By storing your Terraform state in a secure remote location, like an encrypted S3 bucket, you're protecting it from unauthorized access and tampering.
So Terragrunt indirectly promotes security best practices.
Right.
By making it easier to manage remote states securely.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Anything else? Terragrunt also supports the use of input variables, which allows you to avoid hard-coding sensitive information like passwords and API keys directly into your configuration files.
Okay.
Instead, you can pass these secrets in as variables at runtime.
Or even better, use a secrets management tool like HashiCorp Vault to store and manage them securely.
So you're not only separating your configuration from your sensitive data, but you're also leveraging best practices for secrets management, all within the Terragrunt framework.
That's right.
That's a win-win for both convenience and security.
Exactly. It's all about finding the right tools and practices to build secure and robust infrastructure.
This has been incredibly insightful.
Yeah, it has.
We've gone from the core features of Terragrunt to its impact on the future of infrastructure management.
It's been a great discussion.
And we've even touched on the crucial aspects of security and community.
For sure. We've explored how Terragrunt simplifies workflows, promotes code reusability, and empowers developers to build and manage infrastructure at scale.
But before we move on to the final part of our Terragrunt journey, there's one question I have to ask.
All right.
If Terragrunt is so fantastic, why isn't everyone using it? Are there any downsides or challenges that we should be aware of?
That's a fair question, and it's something we'll tackle head-on in the next part of our deep dive. Join us as we explore the potential drawbacks, address common misconceptions, and discuss when Terragrunt might not be the right tool for the job.
All right, so we're back.
Yeah.
The final part of our deep dive into Terragrunt.
It has been a journey.
It really has.
Yeah.
We've seen how Terragrunt can bring order to the chaos.
Yeah.
Boost efficiency.
It does.
And even elevate the way we think about infrastructure management.
Right.
But as we hinted at the end of part 2, No tool is perfect.
That's true.
So let's get real.
Okay.
What are some of the potential downsides or challenges someone might encounter?
Yeah, so one common concern is the learning curve.
Okay.
Even though we've emphasized that Terragrunt simplifies things overall,
right,
it does introduce a new layer on top of Terraform.
Okay.
So there's a new syntax to learn and new concepts to grasp.
Okay.
And it requires a slight shift in how you approach infrastructure management.
So for someone already comfortable with Terraform, adding Terragrunt to the mix might feel like a bit of a hurdle.
Initially, perhaps.
Okay.
But remember, it's a thin wrapper.
Right.
Those core Terraform concepts still apply.
Mm-hmm.
Once you understand how Terragrunt works, it often makes things much clearer, especially as your projects become more complex.
Kind of like learning a new keyboard shortcut.
Exactly.
There's a little effort up front, but it can save you a ton of time down the line.
For sure. And the Terragrunt documentation is excellent, so you're not left figuring things out on your own.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Solid documentation can make all the difference.
Right.
So, learning curve aside,
okay,
what else should we consider?
Another factor is the size and complexity of your infrastructure projects.
Okay.
For smaller, simpler projects, Terragrunt might be overkill.
Okay.
The real benefits shine when you're dealing with multiple environments, intricate dependencies, and large teams.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Right.
You need to assess whether the complexity of your project warrants bringing in Terragrunt.
Exactly. If you're just starting out with Terraform or working on a small personal project, it might make more sense to stick with plain Terraform until you hit that point where you need a higher level of structure and automation.
That's a very practical approach.
Yeah.
Start simple and then scale up your tooling as needed.
Right.
Now, are there any other potential downsides or even misconceptions about Terragrunt that we should address?
There's a common misconception that Terragrunt slows down Terraform execution.
Okay.
Some folks worry that because it adds an extra layer of abstraction, it'll impact performance.
So the perception is that it's trading speed for efficiency.
That's the idea.
Okay.
But in reality, Terragrunt has a negligible impact on performance.
Yeah, okay.
It's designed to be lightweight and efficient. Mm-hmm. It focuses mainly on organizing and managing your Terraform code, not on executing it.
So those actual Terraform runs are essentially the same speed, whether you're using Terragrunt or not.
That's right. Terragrunt is about orchestrating those runs more effectively, not slowing them down. In fact, it can even speed things up in some cases.
Really? How so?
Terragrunt allows you to run certain commands, like Terragrunt plan all and Terragrunt apply all, in parallel across multiple modules.
So instead of processing each module one by one, it can run them concurrently.
Exactly. As long as there are no dependencies between those modules, this can be a huge time saver for projects with a large number of modules.
Okay, so not only does it not slow things down, it can actually make things faster. I like where this is going.
Yeah.
All right, the performance concerns are officially debunked.
Good.
As we wrap up this deep dive,
okay,
are there any final thoughts or takeaways you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I think the key takeaway is this.
Okay.
Terragrunt is a powerful tool that can significantly improve your Terraform experience. Mm-hmm. But it's important to approach it with a clear understanding of its strengths and limitations.
Right.
Don't jump in blindly. Consider the size and complexity of your projects, the learning curve involved, and the potential impact on your existing workflows.
Well said. It's not a magic bullet, but it's a valuable tool to have in your arsenal, especially as your infrastructure grows and evolves. And remember that fantastic Terragrunt community is there to support you along the way.
Absolutely. Engage with the community, explore the documentation, and don't be afraid to experiment.
Great advice. So for all our listeners out there who are ready to take their Terraform skills to the next level, Terragrunt is definitely worth checking out. And who knows, maybe it'll inspire you to create the next generation of infrastructure management tools.
That's the spirit. Thanks for joining us on this Terragrunt deep dive.
It's been a pleasure. We hope you've learned something new, and we encourage you to keep exploring the ever-evolving world of infrastructure as code.